Welcome to Beyond the Board. I'm Sonia Gafsio-Blisk, and I'm honored to break bread with some of the most impactful leaders in the food industry. We're in New York City today, recording this episode at Regen House during New York Climate Week. For most of our Beyond the Board episodes to date, we've focused on entrepreneurs in the packaged goods space. But today, we're going further up to the supply chain, back to the place where it all begins, to have an in-depth conversation about one of the most important players in the food system, the farmer. Farming has always been a risky venture, from commodity fluctuations to capital investment requirements to Mother Nature's variability. But today's farmers are experiencing an additional set of challenges with large corporations purchasing farmland, tougher international competition, increasing operating costs, more frequent natural disasters. Running a family farm has become a battle for survival. As a result, many farmers are being forced out. Time magazine recently reported that we have only 28% of the farms we had 90 years ago, and most estimates indicate that less than 5% of farms will be profitable this year. Today, I'm honored to have a conversation with an incredible woman leader in the food industry and a leading voice advocating for young farmers who work tirelessly to fight for the future of our food system. Welcome, Michelle Hughes, co-executive director of the National Young Farmers Coalition. Michelle, thank you for joining us today. I've been so looking forward to having this conversation with you.
Me too. Thanks so much for having me.
All right. Well, let's start at the beginning. Can you tell me a little bit about the mission of the National Young Farmers Coalition?
Sure. Yeah. So the National Young Farmers Coalition was started just about 12 years ago, and we exist to shift policy and create material benefit for young farmers nationwide, particularly those who are under 40 years old or in their first 10 years of farming.
So tell me how you got into this space. How did you become a part of the National Young Farmers Coalition? Tell our listeners a little bit about you, your background.
Thanks. So I come to farming and agriculture by way of an avenue that is similar to so many other young farmers. I started my career in environmental science and veterinary medicine. I thought that working in large animal medicine would be fruitful and rewarding for me. It was hard. It is adjacent to farming. You are very much a farmer when you work in veterinary medicine in the livestock industry. And so I became a farmer kind of by accident and quickly before I knew it. I'm not from a farm family. I'm from Southern Connecticut. So I have a lot of experience working in and around food systems and food access, but agriculture was quite new to me before I had a care for the food system and environmental science. And many of young farmers in the National Young Farmers Coalition network are first-generation farmers or come to agriculture by way of environmental science as well.
That's really interesting. I actually would have never have guessed that. So it's really environmental science that's drawing folks in to farming?
Yeah. So the National Young Farmers Coalition, we do a survey about every 5 years of the young farmers in our network. In 2022, we produced a report that surveyed over 10,000 young farmers nationwide. 83% of them said that their primary purpose for farming was regenerative agriculture or restoring the environment.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
That's inspiring to hear.
Yeah.
Okay, so share a little bit about what are the biggest challenges facing young farmers today?
Yeah, well, there are so many, unfortunately, and you named some of them so eloquently in the intro, which I really appreciate. But I think for us and, the things that we focus our policy priorities around, Young Farmers is at our heart a federal advocacy organization. We do a lot of mobilizing and organizing of young farmers, but we do have formal policy priorities that we ask of Congress and USDA and policymakers alike at local and state levels.
Let's even take a step further back. Tell me a little bit about some of the policies that you all are focused on.
And those are related directly to our biggest challenges. So I think it's a good way to segue. The biggest challenges for young farmers in our network are certainly land access, equitable land access specifically. We hear a lot about programs that come out of USDA, public funding, but also private funders who are putting together projects, kind of like the biodiversity highway, it sounds like, where folks are trying to get acres that exist in farmland to stay in farmland or move to the next generation of farmers. So we haven't seen in years, I would say, until the Land Capital and Market Access Program that came out last year, we haven't seen a real sizable investment in land access for the next generation. Even though the average age of the farmer is reaching 60, we just don't see a big push, certainly not from the federal government at this point outside of LCM. We hadn't seen that for quite some time. So equitable land access is definitely the first one. And then I would say that is easily followed by access to other capital. Starting farms is extremely capital intensive.
Hugely. And so exclusionary and prohibitive to most folks. Yeah.
And also requires you to have a relationship with the federal government and Farm Service Agency, the agency at USDA that services farmers specifically. It requires you to have a relationship with them that many young farmers may not be comfortable with or may be new to them. You know, young farmers, some of them have a long political history and understand that things ebb and flow, but there are many young farmers, particularly young farmers of color, who have seen generations of their family displaced at the hands of folks who are either in bed with USDA or work at USDA directly. And so they don't really have a platform to feel comfortable working with them, but it is a requirement. So it's a challenge that we work through.
So what would that process look like? What is the level of engagement? If I wanted to start a farm, I'm a young farmer, I'm interested, and we need more young farmers. What's their process with USDA?
Well, all farmers have to get a farm number. So, you know, just like to actually sell food and make a profit off of it or make any money off of it, even if you don't make a profit, you do have to be a formalized, recognized farm through tax forms and things like that. So that's like the basis. And then if you want to participate in any farm programs that are available, which, you know, we have many, the Beginning Farmer Rancher Development Program, the 2501 program, there are many set asides in the federal government that exists for new and beginning farmers and disenfranchised farmers. And so we're grateful for those. But in order to actually apply for those programs, you have to fill out a very lengthy application process. It asks you for information that many farmers may not have access to and don't really have time to find. So when you're asking a farmer to participate in a conservation program or a Farm First program or something that's going to help them with their farm, and it's going to take a strenuous amount of time and maybe some discrimination from folks who work at USDA in that process, it just isn't really welcoming. It doesn't make them feel like something they want to engage in.
Right.
This was the basis actually for me wanting to join USDA's Equity Commission. So it's a governance body that the Biden-Harris administration created, and we served a 3-year term. It's a group of leaders who work in equity in agriculture and the food system who got together to put together a report for USDA to recommend some internal changes they could make to better service farmers.
That's great.
Yeah.
Super, super interesting. So what is the success rate in terms of securing land? I'm still really curious about this because I have long heard it's hard to afford to be a farmer because of the capital, the land requirements, the equipments, and it's hard to make money being a farmer. Yeah. And so I'd love just to continue to unpack that a little bit for our listeners.
I mean, this is probably different depending on, what coalition of folks you ask. We are not the only young farmers that exist, but the young farmers in our network, I think, find success when they really do focus on things that are not their bottom line. I don't think many of our farmers are farming to make money. I think that they see success as I'm able to feed my community. I'm able to be a contributing member of my community. I can make structural change for farmers. That's what farmers in our network are seeing as success. And so I think that's also by nature what we've had to sort of settle for. It doesn't mean that we don't want material benefit for young farmers and that breaking even or making a profit isn't important, because it is for us to continue to exist. But I just don't think it's the primary reason that people farm. So success looks really different, I think, in terms of land acquisition for all different kinds of farmers. And I wish I could tell you this is the way that a young farmer can get land, but because they're not making any more of it, and it's so scarce the way that you can acquire land, I do think you have to have a very specific connection or a unique way. We see these new farm link programs coming up where they're directly connecting older generation farmers to new farmers coming on land.
Which is so cool.
Right, who may never have interacted before. So I think it really is these unique things and people wanting to pay attention and care, like Whole Foods and the biodiversity highway, for example.
Yeah.
I think these are the ways now,
Yeah.
unfortunately, even though none of us really like it. I think we have to stop thinking about land acquisition in the traditional sense
For
if
sure.
we're actually going to have the next generation on land.
For sure. And focus on what are the positive outcomes that we can get from that land
Exactly.
and farming. Like if we could galvanize folks around that idea, it would be super powerful. All right. So I know there is so much in the news every day: interest rate, inflation, tariffs. How is that impacting your members and the young farmers that you're working with? How are folks thinking about a future in the current economic reality?
It's really tough. I mean, I think that we're seeing right now, farmers are in survival mode, many of them. They are expressing going through some of the hardest transitions of their lives and not really understanding what a lot of it means. There's a lot of stuff that happens in the economy that is outside of a lot of our control as citizens, right? And farmers are a part of that. So I think a lot of it is creating mass confusion for them, if I'm being honest. I think a lot of our young farmers are still quite new as business owners and entrepreneurs. They're still learning. But I will say it's giving them a level of adaptability that I think, we don't see in a lot of other generations. Young farmers are ready for whatever's coming at them.
Yeah.
And so I think they're just like, it's another thing that we're going to figure out how to weather together. And it's why it's so important for organizations like Young Farmers and the National Sustainable Agriculture Coalition and Black Farmer Fund and these organizations we work with to exist right now.
Do you all provide any education and training in business? I'm just thinking back to your comment on most folks are coming through the avenue of environmental sciences. And I mean, this is a complicated business to manage, a lot of capital, a lot of commodity fluctuation. How does a young farmer equip themselves for that?
I would be remiss to say that people have varying feelings about USD cooperative extension, but there are some cooperative extensions that are running really well. So I don't want to underscore the value of like rural extension offices. So I think that they are supposed to be the main provider of that. And I think some of them do a really good job and some of them need a lot of work. But we don't actually have a business services portfolio. Young Farmers historically did have a business services portfolio. That work transitioned out of our organization when our founding executive director went on to start an online cooperative called Grown By. Okay. So a lot of that work moved outside, and we do support a lot of other organizations and companies that provide pro bono services to farmers. Someone that comes to mind a lot, Black Farmer Fund, I keep mentioning. Yes. They do direct financial services. Anthony Chang used to do with Kitchen Table Advisors is now, oh my God, what is the name of their new group? Life Group.
Okay.
Yeah, they do a lot of investment work for young farmers as well. So we don't do that work, but we certainly support it.
Okay.
And we advocate for USDA to do a better job of providing those services as well. I would say that's our lane.
Yeah, and it makes a ton of sense. So can you just talk a little bit about the Farm Bill? What did it like? Give folks some context just in general, and then we'll dive in a bit deeper.
I can try. Hopefully this won't put anyone to sleep. Federal legislation is just so much fun. The Farm Bill is the only piece of legislation that creates farm and food policy in the U.S. So it covers some of the programs I mentioned before, including like the Beginning Farmer Rancher Development Program. But it also includes SNAP and nutrition hunger assistance. Yeah, 80% of the Farm Bill is dedicated to nutrition assistance, actually, most of the money in the Farm Bill. So we have a very small amount that actually goes to farm programs in this country. So the Equity Commission taught me that in relation to other departments in the federal government, agriculture is actually given a budget that is significantly smaller than other departments. And most of the money for food and ag does go to food. And I am not someone who is supportive of like divisiveness between food and ag systems. I think that they should work together. And I think hunger and nutrition assistance is something that is front of mind for us right now.
We don't have a stable food system unless we have a stable agricultural system. So fully support that view. So what else, Farm Bill? What should our listeners know about it?
Yeah. I mean, the things to know right now are the Farm Bill, we're overdue for a Farm Bill. It's supposed to come out every 5 years. The last time a Farm Bill came out, I believe was in technically we're operating in like a 2018 Farm Bill right now, or we were supposed to get a 2023 Farm Bill. Mm-hmm. And that didn't happen. And so the Farm Bill has been kind of kicked down the road, and we're hearing a lot of different things about it. Maybe the Farm Bill is an antiquated piece of legislation. Maybe it won't come out again. Maybe farm policy will look different in the future. Everybody has their feelings about that. I think this is a personal perspective, not a young farmer's perspective, but I think it is a challenge to democracy when you have a very clear policy setting process that happens every 5 years, which is unheard of. Most countries don't have a food and farm piece of legislation for food and farm programs that they get to give input into and talk about every 5 years to keep their food system relevant. So I'm open to new ideas. Waiting every 5 years hasn't been great either. But if the legislation that ends up in any version of a final farm bill or whatever the farm bill looks anything like the Big Beautiful Bill, young farmers certainly will not be in support of it. As in the Young Farmers Coalition, our organization won't be in support of it.
Got it. Yeah. What are some of the elements that you would hope to change, or some of the things that most concern you?
I mean, certainly nutrition assistance and hunger. The cuts to food stamps and Medicaid that we've seen this year affect young farmers significantly.
Tell us more. Well, how does that, the link between food assistance and young farmers?
Yeah. Young farmers are early in their career. Many of them rely on food stamps as a form of revenue. A lot of their customers, they're interested in creating food access and foodways for their communities, many of which are low-income communities, not all, but many. And so if they can't take food stamps as a form of payment, then it's a revenue source lost for something that already is probably in the red as a business. And also farmers themselves might be recipients of food stamps. And so their availability and access to federal programming as an individual outside of being a farmer is challenged as well.
Very, very interesting. Anything else you would call out around the Farm Bill and funding, particularly for historically underrepresented farmers?
It's really disheartening to talk about, to be honest, when I think about it, because my personal story is so linked to so much of what's happening to Black farmers. I didn't go into too much detail about my farming background, but I used to be a hog farmer. I used to chase piglets around all day. It was nice and fun, but it was extremely difficult. And I farmed in rural Pennsylvania, where there were not that many people who looked like me in my community, and certainly none in my professional network. So what's happening to specifically Black farmers right now is very, very hard to watch. I think it's always hard to watch what's happening to people who look like me in agriculture. And I think now it's even more disproportionate. The way we talk about issues in ag at Young Farmers Coalition is that all farmers are affected by discrimination, disenfranchisement. If we uplift the folks who need help the most, we uplift the entire farming community. Oftentimes, those are Black and brown people in the food and farm system. And it's not just Black and brown people, but it is often, very often, majority Black and brown folks that we need to lift up from the bottom up. And so I think what's happening right now is that there is a real, even though people have felt this for years and generations, and I don't mean to erase them, but it feels to me like a more mainstream acceptance that for farmers of color and young Black farmers specifically, the federal government will not be there for us. We have to create our own way to farm successfully. We have to create our own paths. And that does mean having leaders that look like me and Olivia Watkins and Karen Washington from New York, specifically, who create these programs like the Breeding Seeds Fellowship that awards $50,000 to farmers every year, a group of farmers every year. They can use it for whatever they want. Young Farmers used to have a tiny grant program of $5,000, but that was certainly too small. And so I think it's just those things in our own community that we have to think about. I think we have to just release this notion that we can rely on anyone for anything when there is this layered, racialized environment on top of it. It's just too complicated.
I mean, as we started the discussion, farming is hard to begin with. And there's, I think, so much complexity, both economic, political, in addition to just running a business, has so much inherent variability and risk associated with it. It is surely a feat, and something when you like stop and pause that I really admire folks that like have the commitment. But selfishly for me, from Whole Foods, but just even as a human on this planet, without farms, we don't have food. So it's a really, really, really important part of our ecosystem and our food system and our society. So let's talk a little bit about climate. How are young farmers adapting to climate change?
Young farmers are facing, as we've talked about, some of the toughest climate change impacts. But again, we are getting used to it, to be honest. I think young farmers are creating some of the most innovative and creative economic and climate solutions, especially in regard to sustainability and regeneration. We see this like resurgence of indigenous practice coming back into the young farmer stream and like wanting to make that very mainstream. It's something we tried to push with USDA for a while, and I think the Equity Commission was somewhat successful in that, although I am a little critical of where we landed. But I think that the like resurgence and like re-rise of actually honoring indigenous practice is something that I think is very unique to
what's an example for our listeners of indigenous practice that you've seen?
I'm certainly not an expert in indigenous farming practice, but I think generally speaking, the idea is that we see farmers as land stewards who work in collaboration with the land, with the livestock on the land. One thing that I've seen a lot of talk and conversation about, and that young farmers had an event on a few weeks ago, is wildfire management.
Yes.
Again, I shouldn't be talking about wildfire practices because I've never actually done them myself, but I think that is a space where I'm hearing a lot about returning to indigenous practice to sort of control where the fires are going, be intentional about cover cropping, and then like redoing the land completely through wildfire management. So I feel like that's the coolest thing I've heard about lately that we've been uplifting.
And that's so similar to, I know yesterday we talked a little bit about the work Whole Foods is doing along with a coalition of others in rewilding land. And that's exactly it. It's bringing back the native plants to help biodiversity and wildlife and watershed and all of those things. But it's, ensuring that we are stewarding our lands in a way that we're both making the land productive, but also helping with conservation. So very, very interesting. Anything that you're seeing in the areas of water management and soil health? Those are another two topics that you hear about a lot. I have a personal passion for and lots of interest, but I'm curious how your organization or any best practices that you've seen among your members.
I mean, I think soil health and water conservation, in terms of natural resources, they're like the top two things we focus on. I would say it's also like the most easily accessible, probably, to young farmers as well, to make like an actual change in conservation. I would say the work that I see being done, honestly, in the West, like water in the West, I recently relocated to Colorado. Okay. So I have had the pleasure of hanging out with some of the folks in our network there and learning more about the Colorado River Basin. I feel like restoring waterways is definitely something that when I talk to the people and learn about them and the acequias that exist in the West, that do have some indigenous connection as well. Those are like really, really cool projects that I'm hearing about.
Any success stories you would share? Or?
I think the work that I've heard about the acequias doing in the Southwest are
And tell our listeners what an acequia is.
Acequias are described as ancient community-governed, gravity-fed irrigation, ditch, and water systems.
Okay.
So it looks like they're indigenous to Spain and Mexico, sounds like, in the Southwest, in Colorado specifically. But they're doing a lot of water restoration is the best way that I can describe it. And they do it in the advancement of the folks that farm around where they are, right?
Okay.
And so it's not that I'm taking anything away from like cleaning up waterways in general, but I think the acequias are specifically related to agricultural settlements.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Very, very cool. I learned something. How are you all thinking about technology and the role that technology will play in small scale farming and sustainable agriculture?
I think, technology and AI in general are like very divisive topics in agriculture. From what I've seen, I don't think there's any consensus, I would say, among folks that I talk to or in the Young Farmers Coalition around tech and AI, really. I think there is really a varied perspective on it. I mean, I think that there are a lot of folks in the Young Farmers Coalition network who are very weary of technological advancements that have climate impacts. It is adverse to the point of their existence and why they farm. But there are some folks who don't feel that way, right? I mean, we have a varied spectrum of people in that. I think that there is potential for technology and AI to be really helpful to agriculture personally as an individual. But if I was farming, I don't know that I personally would engage in like all of the things that are out on the market. So I think it's a little soon really to say where our network is falling on certain things until there's like more tech coming out.
Cool.
Yeah.
And then farms are always an anchor point in communities. So how is the changing demographic of young farmers reshaping our just agricultural communities in general?
Oh, this is such a good question. I mean, I think it's changing so much of the demographics of farming. The USDA does a census every 5 years, the Census of Agriculture.
Yeah.
I think the next one is set to come out in 2027, actually, if I remember correctly. But they do a census of agriculture, and, you know, the census will tell you that farmers are like 97% white in the US, I think. But the survey we did of 10,000 young farmers doesn't show that farmers are majority people of color, but it certainly doesn't show them as a minority. Our
Interesting.
network is not 90% white. And so it does make you wonder how many people are actually taking the census of ag who farm. You know, there's a lot of questions about stats around that. But I think that young farmers as a demographic are much, much more diverse than the general farming population. And selfishly, I hope it stays that way.
What gives you hope about the future of farming in America?
This is going to be a cliche answer. Every time that I visit a farmer or I talk to a farmer and they tell me that something good happened, that's truly what gives me hope. Like, I just feel like we are so inundated with bad news these days. It's really hard to stay positive, especially advocating for like the small farmer is very difficult these days. And so it gives me hope when I hear that even in what people are considering some of the darkest times, there are still wins. And I also think that we're young and, you know, I also have like a very short career in agriculture in comparison to so many of my mentors. And I think it's a chapter. I don't think that like political moments, they're referred to as moments and chapters and eras for a reason. I think things pass and everything happens for a reason. And so, you know, what gives me hope is watching farmers come up with creative and innovative and adaptable ideas to things that we once thought were insurmountable. There are things that, like farmer mental health 10 years ago, we couldn't have possibly imagined it would have millions of dollars allocated to it in the farm bill that it does now, right? Like we would have never imagined that. So incremental change, I guess.
That's great perspective.
Yeah.
I like that. I like that. How can our listeners support young farmers in their communities?
This is my favorite question. Definitely visiting farmers markets. If you don't know when your local farmers market is, just find out. Go there. Talk to the farmers. Farmers markets are full of all types of artisanal vendors. They're all great and wonderful, but just make sure you actually talk to the people who are selling you the food. Buy things from them. It will mean that they continue to come to farmers markets. It will mean that other farmers will feel like they should come to those farmers markets. And then I think supporting local restaurants that source from farmers. That where you live. And I am not someone who thinks that everything should be grown within 50 miles of where you live. I also think that you can think about seasonality and where things grow best so that, you know, you can choose to buy things from places that, you know, it doesn't create like havoc in our food system and expect every region to produce every single piece of produce, which is not a realistic ask. And also settle for things that are in season. Don't expect produce that is not in season in August to be in season all year round. Yeah. It's just not a thing.
Well, those are easy tips that everyone can do. And I know I try to do my part supporting local restaurants. So awesome. Anything else you'd like to share?
Yeah, I mean, I probably should say a few things about the National Young Farmers Coalition. If you'd like to get involved in our work at the National Young Farmers Coalition, the easiest way is to join our newsletter. You can join at youngfarmers.org. You can also engage with us in bigger ways. We have advocacy asks all the time. You can take direct action with young farmers to talk to Congress people in your districts or in your state to advocate for policy for young farmers. And of course, we are always open to individual donations on our website if people are interested in that as well.
Super. And we'll include all of that information. Well,
Thanks.
This has been such an interesting conversation. I learned a lot. So thank you for sharing your insights and just shining a light on the importance of supporting our young farmers. And thank you so much for the incredible work you and the Young Farmers Coalition continues to do. It is important to our food system and it's important to our society. So I appreciate that. Before I let you go, I want to do a lightning round. This is the fun part.
Oh, yay.
So some quick hit questions here. All right. Number one, vegetable you hated as a kid.
Asparagus.
Asparagus. All right. Most beautiful farm you have visited.
That's tough. Oh my goodness. The most beautiful farm I've ever visited. I think it was in Costa Rica.
Ooh, what type of farm?
I think coffee.
Coffee.
Had to be.
I have made a trip with our sourcing team visiting some coffee farms in Costa Rica, and I can see why you would say that, because there are also many of which are bird sanctuaries on top of it. Yeah, it's a tough one, I'm sure, for you. What's something that may surprise us about you? Other than that you are a pig farmer, which that surprised me.
But this is the most surprising thing about me, I think. Wow, this is embarrassing. I used to be a national hula hoop champion.
That's not embarrassing. That's impressive. All right. What 3 traits make a good leader?
Empathy. Confidence. Creativity.
I like that answer. The most surprising crop you've seen a young farmer growing?
Mushrooms.
Mushrooms.
Easy.
Those are cool to grow.
Yeah.
Most requested resource from your organization?
Money.
Of course. I knew the answer to that. Biggest misperception about food right now?
That there isn't enough to go around.
Good. Outside of agriculture, what is the most important skill needed in farming?
Fortitude.
Can I
say that? Is that a skill?
It's a learned skill. How about that?
Yeah.
We'll call it a skill.
Right.
And then lastly, what's next for the National Young Farmers Coalition?
So Young Farmers is getting ready to go into a strategic planning process, which is super exciting for us because we've been using the same language for the past 5 years, which many of us are starting to feel is time for a revamp. So we're looking toward our next set of policy priorities. I don't think they'll fall outside of land access, climate mitigation, and farmer mental health. But I think we might be able to look at some new avenues for things like food access, immigration, general public health that in the past we haven't had as much clarity on as an organization and where we stand on that and kind of how we can show up. So even though it's going to be a long process, I'm really excited to talk about where our organization can go through that process.
Yeah, that sounds really exciting.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today on Beyond the Board. Until next time, let's keep supporting organizations like the National Young Farmers Coalition. Supporting our farms and our food system is crucial for ensuring that there's always a delicious thing to enjoy as we gather around the table. Thank you, Michelle.